Steve. Hey, Steve.
Hello.
Good to see you.
You too, Keith, isn't it? Yeah. Hey. Cool.
How are you today, Steve?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, it's I'm down here in Greece in the Dodecanese Islands where I live now, and have my studio here, and yeah, I'm enjoying life. It's a bit milder weather than in the UK, so we get a little bit more sunshine, you know.
Oh yeah. Wonderful. So you love the seaside?
Sorry?
So you
Yeah,
love
we're
the
on an
seaside?
island. Yeah. We live on a small island in the Dodecanese called Kalimnos. It's quite near Turkey and near the
that's
Kos
cool.
Island. Yeah, it's nice.
Wonderful.
So we've been here a few years now, yeah.
It's awesome, Steve. Awesome, Steve. It's a real pleasure to meet you here today. It's really awesome to meet you.
You too, cheers. You too. Yeah, you've got a metal magazine in
Yes.
that's online and everything. Yeah, cool.
Thanks, Steve. So, Steve, on 26th November, you put up 100 miles per hour at live at 100 Club. So, can you tell me the making of this live album and how you come up with the idea of putting up this album?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think because the 100 miles an hour album that we made all those years ago was being cited as a bit of a milestone in the sort of development of metal and rock, and we got back together after many years. It was about 25, 27 years I'd not played with the band, and through social media, there was a lot of interest and underground interest trying to find out what had happened to the band, because a lot of people had not forgotten the old records, which was really cool. And basically, I was completely out of the loop. I hadn't a clue, really. I don't really do much social media. And then we did a thing called LinkedIn. I was working in education in the UK at the time, and I was doing this thing for LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And my old drummer who played on the original album contacted me and asked if I was the Steve Zodiac from Vardis, who he used to play with all those years ago. And I basically thought, well, I don't know what to do, because I didn't know whether I wanted to sort of come back out and play again, really live and stuff. I've never stopped playing guitar, I have to say. I've always written songs and played my acoustic guitars and stuff. And then basically what happened is I decided, my wife, Irene, she said to me, look, you've got to do this again, because you can still play guitar. And if you were a football player, for example, you couldn't do this. You know, at your age, you can't suddenly come back and become a football player or a boxer, you know, but you can actually play this thing, you know, so why not? Why not have a go? Age doesn't matter with rock and roll. It's really irrelevant, in the sense that the energy is in the music, and the person is giving something from inside, so you should give it a go. So my wife is the main troublemaker for causing this sort of reunion. And then it had always been in my mind to do another live album when we got back together. And the 100 Club in Oxford Street in the West End of London is the only venue in London that we've never played back in the day. We played everywhere, you know, the Hammersmith Odeon, the Marquee, the Lyceum, all the gigs, all the really amazing circuit of gigs that was around at that time. But the one gig we didn't play was the 100 Club. And it was the oldest gig, that club gig in London. All the great blues players like Muddy Waters and Chuck Berry and all these, my idols, you know, in terms of my inspiration. And I'd never done it, simply because in the 70s, when I was a young man, the 100 Club was known more for punk and new wave scene in London at the time. It was more of a venue for, you know, the Sex Pistols and Sham 69 and all these more sort of edgier, punkier bands. And Vardis never really fitted that. We were more of a marquee type band. So we never played it, and I always regretted never actually walking on stage in the venue that is so historical to me.
Yeah.
And I'd seen recently that the Rolling Stones and Metallica and one or two other people had played there in more modern times for warm-up shows for the bigger festivals at the, you know, the big stadium concerts that they then went on to do at Wembley and stuff. And I thought, you know, I'd love to play 100 miles an hour, the track. I never really got round to doing it in the modern times because there was so much material. I really was stretching myself a little bit, learning the songs again on to play the shows. And basically, I sort of thought, I'm not sure about doing this guitar solo stuff and all this stuff again. I weren't too sure. And so I kept putting it in the back of my mind, but it was always there. And I thought, this 100 miles an hour at the 100 Club, it's got to be the way, it's got to be done. I've got to get this out of my system. You know, I had no idea whether we would make a good recording or not at that time. And then basically over the years, these recent years, I've sort of discussed it with Joe and so on, and we've sort of thought it through. And I got offered an opportunity to play the 100 Club, and two dates came up: Friday the 13th of March and Saturday the 14th of March 2020. And I could have chose the Saturday because Saturday is, in some ways, Saturday night is the night for fighting. You know, it's the best night of the week, sort of thing. And I thought, now we'll go for the Friday the 13th because, you know, it sort of brings out the more mystic, darker side in my psyche. And I thought, yeah, go for the Friday the 13th. That's got to be done. And we did that show, not really knowing what we would get. It was a one-hit show. It was just one night, with no real idea if we were going to be able to get a full album out of it in terms of, you know, the quality of the performance. Most, as Joe Clancy pointed out to me, most albums are recorded over a tour, or at least 1 or 2, 3 shows, which is what we did in the original 100 miles an hour. We played maybe 2 or 3 shows and then lifted the tracks from those to make the album. The 100 Club album is one show. It's just bang. And yeah, we played out of the skins and we enjoyed ourselves. And I think anyone that bought the original 100 miles an hour will enjoy this one. I did, so that's all I can say. But that's how it happened. We were very lucky because the day after the Friday the 13th was literally the day that the whole of the UK started to really lock down with the coronavirus. And in fact, all the gigs were pulled from Saturday the 14th. There was no more music in the UK for over another year. So it was a very, very lucky decision that I made to go for Friday the 13th, you see.
Best day.
But yeah, it's in the stars, must be in the stars. What can I say?
Absolutely, absolutely. And
go on, Keith. Does that explain it?
Yeah. And the beginning of 100 miles an hour goes way back to the 80s, early 80s, like it's almost 40 years. So how does it feel to go back to those days and bring back something that is so precious and so memorable to you? And how do you feel about that?
You know, it's quite incredible because, you know, that there's very few things in life as you grow older, because life is too short. Even if you live a long time, it's still too short, you know. As they all say, in life's too short. Well, you can live a long time, but it's still too short, because I don't know how I got here now. It's just like a flash. So basically, there are very few things in life that make you feel like a teenager. And comedy is one thing, and music is another. I feel when you laugh, you feel young. When you listen to music that you love, that's from the heart, you feel young. So to walk on stage and play and to make the noise, the sound that was exactly like the sound we made all those years ago, it's quite a phenomenal thing. And all of a sudden, my old bones start to loosen up, and I start to, it's almost like a metamorphosis. It's like you feel yourself going back in time age-wise. The music sounds fresh and energetic and just as sort of punky and edgy as it always did. But that's what gives you that sort of feeling. And for that 1 hour or 2 hours that you're on stage, you feel like a kid again. And that is a phenomenal thing. And I can only say that I believe the audience feel that as well. So when you're playing at a show that's special, doesn't matter how big it is, it doesn't matter whether it's a club or a big football stadium, the whole thing is one energy. The crowd, the band, the music brings everything into one energy, and that energy makes everybody feel like a teenager again.
Absolutely.
You know what I come. So this is the power of music, and especially rock and roll and heavy rock and heavy metal, because it's got that energy so vibrantly in there. And I think, you know, we're all very lucky to enjoy rock music, and people that understand rock music feel that, you know, it makes them feel alive. And hopefully that's what we tried to capture that night on that one hit show, the one recorded show. And yeah, I feel young again. And I can say this, and this is not, this is no lie. You know, there's a phenomenon, and a lot of people who lose limbs in accidents, or they lose limbs as a soldier or whatever, and they have a phantom experience. You know, a good friend of mine actually lost his foot in a car accident, and he told me he could still feel that his foot was on his leg, you know. I actually do this with the guitar, and I can feel my long hair like yours. I can feel it move as if it's there, like this. I should have. Does that sound strange? It's true. It's like I go, and like I can feel it go like this. You know, when you do the old head banging, yeah, and you feel the hair move, and I can feel it. It's really weird, that. I have to say, it's like a phantom hairstyle. Oh my God. Listen, no, I mean, it's just more proof to me that rock and music transcends time. It's a time machine. It makes you feel. It can be new music, but it still makes you feel young, and that's the key to music, all music, I think.
Absolutely, Steve. Absolutely. And do you guys have any plans to get back into the studio to make any new album in the coming year or something?
Sure thing. I mean, the whole thing, as you know, just ground to a halt in 2020. Everything just stopped, and quite a few of the studios and the places in London where we used to record as well, they've closed down. One or two of them now, the rehearsal places and so on, have gone for good. So I have a studio here in Kalymnos, and Joe Clancy, who is not just a great drummer, but a great engineer as well. He's a very good mix engineer. He has a studio as well in Newcastle in the north of England. And so Rolly Bailey, the bass player, lives in London still. I do go to London quite a bit. I still spend time there. But the thing is, geographically, and especially with the COVID and the lockdowns and the political sort of state of situations, getting everybody together is not straightforward anymore. So we're planning to play a couple of shows next spring in March in the UK. I think one's in Great Yarmouth and the other one's in Nuneaton, I think, at the moment, that have been sort of penciled in. But there'll be some more coming in the pipeline. But it's very difficult for not just artists and bands, but for promoters to push the shows and to book the venues and to sell the tickets, and then for the politicians to turn around and say, you know, it's a scary time still. We've got, you know, we've got an uncertain time, and I think it's going to be a long time. Well, probably a few years before everybody gets on top of this virus and really starts to not be a threat anymore in terms of the variants and all the things that we see coming out these days on TV. And it is scary for not just artists, but for bands as well, and for promoters as well, you know. And I feel for them, really, for the whole industry. But touch wood, if we don't get any major political setbacks in terms of lockdowns and restrictions, we are certainly playing some shows next spring, and we will be booking some studio time at that time when all three of us get back together, and we lay down the backing tracks. You know, I'm still working on my songs here and putting a lot of stuff together. And with the great thing, as we know now, talking like this together, the power of the internet has revolutionized it for us all. God knows what we would have done had we not had this fantastic file transfers and file sharing. Because when we recorded the 100 Club show, the 100 miles an hour show, it was only through WeTransfer and all these file share systems that myself, who I master the album here in my studio, and Joe mixes it up in Newcastle. And it's only through the power of the internet that we were able to do that, you know. So we spent most of the lockdown mixing the album and transferring files and bringing it all together for SPV. So yeah, I'm very confident, and I'm optimistic that we will be playing early next year, and we will start to record some new songs in the studio as well. So I don't want to sound negative in any way, but it's very difficult to be sure.
Yeah, I know. Wonderful, wonderful. And Vardis was started in the new wave era back in the 70s, but you guys were so different. You created a new kind of music, a rebel music, and it paved way for the modern day speed metal and thrash metal, and a lot of bands are inspired because of you guys, and they started their own style. So how do you feel about making this all come amazing for you guys?
Well, it's an amazing honor for me to feel part of that time. That whole movement in music was a great time. It was just after the punk rock movement, and we never realized what was going on, to be honest. I think what happened was, I mean, I've always been brought up from being a very small child listening to rock and roll music and country music, American music, basically, all the great blues. My parents in the 50s and early 60s always had a lot of American, you know, blues music, rock and roll music. My mum would always singing Elvis Presley songs, and you know, the real 50s sort of music. Jerry Lee Lewis, Little Richard was like, you know, what can we say? You know, all these guys. So I was listening to all this back then as a 5-year-old, you know, as a small boy. And then as I grew up in the 70s and the late 60s, it was incredible time, because I think the first introduction for me as someone aspiring to be a musician, because I had really no intention of that when I was a schoolboy, until I went and we bunked off school to go and see the movie Woodstock at the cinema. It had just come out in the cinema, you know, the great festival at Woodstock in the US, and all these great artists on there like Bob Dylan, and you know, just phenomenal festival, phenomenal. And then, of course, the man at the end of the show closed the show, dressed in his Native American beads and this white Fender Stratocaster, and the poise of the man, the way he just looked, the shapes that he created with his presence. Of course, Jimi Hendrix revolutionized the whole of rock music forever, because he was the first man to really understand that guitar, electric guitar playing, can be a performance art in its own right, not just as a music making machine, but as a performance art. Now, what I mean by that is, I'm a firm believer in old school technology to make noise, to make sound.
Yeah.
And I love the old valve amplifiers, the Voxes, the Marshalls, all this stuff. Sound City, we used to have Selma, all these old valve amplifiers. And the valves are like organic almost in the way they work. And they interact with the coil of wire and the magnet in the guitar pickup. And when your body and your body shape changes, it creates this loop between the amplifier, the guitar, and the person. You have like a triangle. And this is what Hendrix seemed to invent. And I could see it as a schoolboy. I almost sensed what he was doing, his positioning, the way he could just turn and make the guitar sound completely different by bringing in this oscillation from the valves in the Marshall amplifier to the Stratocaster pickups. And he was creating sound without actually doing any, it just moving his body changed the sound. I don't know why I saw that. I have no idea, because I was only 13 years old, maybe. And I couldn't play guitar. I had no idea, but what I saw was this guy making a sound that I liked, not necessarily by doing this, but by doing this, and by doing this, by doing that. And that was changing the triangle shape and creating almost this unique sound. And this combination of playing melodies and notes in pitch inside the oscillation of a valve generated amplifier sound, distortion, feedback, it just took me on this journey. And from that moment, I said to myself, you know, I'm going to learn to play this instrument. I need to play guitar. I need to learn how to play. And I set off on the journey at that moment from seeing that movie. Now, I forgot the question. What did you ask me? Sorry, was that the answer to the question? I have no idea.
We were talking about the innovations that you created way back with the new wave, with the being a rebel music.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. So what this guy, what Jimmy did to me, set me on a journey which over the next 5 or 10 years, I implemented into putting a band together at school and trying to create this unique sound of something that was different. I didn't want to be a Jimi Hendrix impersonator. I didn't want to play covers of rock music and rock songs. In the north of England at that time, all the working men's clubs were booking rock bands who played stuff out of the charts and the pop charts. And in England, the pop charts in the 70s or the mid-late 70s was a lot of heavy rock, you know?
Yeah. You
had amazing charts, you know? It had just come through the punk thing, and some of that was really heavy and edgy, you know, some of the Pistol stuff and that, it really fired up the energy. You had Alice Cooper, you had Deep Purple, you had even Black Sabbath, and all these bands going in the pop charts. It was just crazy, really, when you think about it today. Even bands like Slade and T-Rex. Some of their
Yeah.
stuff was so sort of punchy and heavy, and like the guitar sounds were fantastic. And I remember thinking, we'll play a few of these because I wanted to play enough gigs to make enough money to buy a PA system and buy a better guitar and a better amplifier. And we played a few sort of covers, but then because I'd been writing songs for quite a while and poetry before that, really, I started to throw in some of my own songs, and in this working men's club sort of circuit, which sort of stretched all the way from Birmingham, all the way to Newcastle in the north, all the way from Liverpool in the west through Manchester, Leeds, and then Hull on the east coast of England. All this area there were thousands of these working men's clubs where all the coal miners and factory workers would go to have a drink and relax. And I was throwing in this original material that I'd written, and it was going down as well, or as good as, I don't know, a Thin Lizzy's tune or a Free tune or whatever, you know, this kind of thing. And I'm thinking, the audience like what we're doing. They like, you know, we're playing tracks like Move Along and Situation Negative, stuff like this, and the audience were getting into it. And I'm thinking, this is pretty cool, you know. And we ended up playing a 100% original set in these working men's clubs, which was sort of unprecedented. It was sort of, we didn't even know we were doing it really till eventually we got signed by Logo Records, and they said, what do you want to do? And I go in the studio and record, and we did a few recordings in the studio, and I just said, you know what, I think we should just record what we've been doing live for the past couple of years. And that's what the 100 Miles an Hour album actually is. It's just basically what we were playing in those working men's clubs back in the mid-late 70s. Yeah. What was the question again? I've forgotten again.
The question was, like, you failed the milestones for the modern speed metal and thrash metal. So that's what.
Oh, I see. Yeah, of course. So yeah, the tempo thing, I think that's why, in terms of, I think what I've just explained is that Vardis had no preconceptions about music, and as I mentioned earlier, a lot of the punky stuff I used to like as well. You know, a lot of the edgy sort of up-tempo, fast power, speed punk that people used to really pogo to. Of course, bands like Motorhead were coming strong at that time and on the scene, and they had a lot of punch and power and tempo. And we just fell into sort of fusing together all the influences of rock and roll, punk, hard metal, rock, which I suppose it just sort of clicked. And who knows why we did it that way, but it just seemed to work, and we enjoyed it, and the audiences enjoyed it. We didn't know that it was developing a genre in its own way. So it's an incredible honor to think that what we created in our sound had a small influence in developing some kind of rock metal sort of movement in terms of other bands and the speed that we now hear, especially, you know, with the, I mean, the tempos are incredible in a lot of it. You just think, my God, you know. But yeah, things like If I Were King and them sort of tracks, we just wanted to unleash energy, unleash inner feelings, you know. Although the music scene in the UK was fantastic in the 70s, the actual place to live, you know, wages were low, the work was hard, there was a lot of political unrest, we had a lot of, you know, it was a mess really, the UK at one point for a couple of years in the 70s, and there was a lot of depression, the power cuts, we had all sorts going on. And I suppose what the punks did give people was this sort of, you know, attitude that's where that came from. The punk rockers did that to the whole system because they felt it had failed a generation. And of course, the metal mindset took that a step further. And I think through Lemmy, obviously, he was one of the main protagonists of sort of that attitude. And I think, so I can sort of see why it's happened and how it's come along. So yeah, in answer to the question, if there is a simple answer, I think sometimes when you sort of see it thrashing and thrashing and thrashing, and you feel that sort of, again, the oscillation of the sound and the music, and it sort of goes into a cyclic thing of its own almost and creates an energy of its own. And I think it's incredible that a lot of these sort of more contemporary sort of bands have tuned in on that and developed a sound that is pure sort of thrash or speed, because what it does is it gives people in this modern sense the same feeling I got when I saw the triangle of Hendrix and his amplifier and the oscillation between the valves and the copper coil pickups of the Stratocaster doing this like really fast, and you could hear it in the sound, and I could hear that in that, even though we were playing music that was a lot slower in tempo, I could still hear that in the guitar sound sort of oscillating. It's a very strange thing, but yeah, it's an honor, and it's a real, makes me feel very humble that we've been honest about his music over the years, and people have realized that, I think, and used it as a sort of inspiration in the way that I used, you know, my input of sound, going back from being a small boy to listening to Little Richard all the way to Hendrix, all the way then through. So yeah, I mean, I think we all carry the baton of the sort of post-war rock and roll era, and we pass it on to next generation. And I think in a way, yeah, it's great to think that the bands, all the bands in the 70s who were playing heavy rock and heavy metal, and the new wave of British heavy metal came along and passed on that sort of baton in this relay of rock and roll, really. I think that's the answer.
Amazing.
You've got to tell me to stop talking, you know, because
it's a pleasure to hear that whatever you're sharing is so amazing. It's great to hear all those things from you, Steve. Awesome. Thank you for that. And Steve, I know there'll be a lot of great moments in decades of making music. So is there something particular that is always on your mind that you want to share with me today?
Why, heck. Can you be a little bit more specific? I mean, can you direct me a little?
On musical direction, like you might have come along a long way with multiple bands, different people, and there should be a lot of special moments that would have happened for you over the years. So anything special that you want to share with me?
I just think we played a show called the Heavy Metal Barn Dance in the Midlands at Stafford Bingley Hall, and there was Motorhead, Saxon, Weapon, White Spirit, Girls' School, Vardis, and I think the whole show was, it was in a big sort of cattle market, and it was supposed to hold about 10,000 people. This venue. This is the very first show that I'd played that was sort of more than a couple of thousand people. It was literally going to be a big festival, and because in those days the health and safety wasn't really that relevant, they just let people come in. So I'm sure there must have been at least 20,000 people. It was just rammed. And I remember that show being the first time I realized that Vardis music had a real effect on a lot of people. It's when, you know, that moment where you sort of engage properly with the audience, and you feel that moment of so many people coming together as one energy, as I said earlier. And so that was very special, being on stage and seeing, you know, I think it was the middle section of Situation Negative, and I just made the gesture to get the hand claps going, and it all just kicked off, and it was just like this incredible buzz, that energy. And the reason it's a special moment for me is because I looked across, so we're playing the old Telecaster, and I looked across and stood across. There was this lady, and she was stood there in this buckskin, like again, like a cowboy jacket with the tassels, you know.
Yeah.
And she had a little tassely dress in buckskin. And I looked at her and I thought, I'm playing away like this. And as she was looking at me, and I'm looking at her. And I just thought, that's a nice lady. And I go, and I sort of, you know, and I kept drawing myself to that stage left sight line, and she was just stood looking at me. And after we came off, I went up to her and sort of introduced myself, whatever. And that was Irene, who became my wife.
Wow, that's amazing.
And we fell in love at first sight. And I was on stage there, and she was stood there, and that was my wife now for over 40 years.
Amazing.
And she's still to this, and she's the reason I'm playing again now. And yeah, it's phenomenal, really, when I think about it. She was working for the same company that we were managed by at the time, which also managed, I think, the Motorhead setup. She was working for them, Irene, my wife, yeah. So playing that show and realizing that Vardis had a real energy that connected, and at the same time finding the person in my life that I connected with. That's a special gig.
Amazing.
That is the gig.
Amazing, amazing, Steve. Thanks so much for sharing this with me. So amazing to hear that.
I don't think I've told anybody that, so there you go. But it's a special gig. Yeah, the heavy metal barn dance, that's what it was called.
Wonderful, wonderful, Steve. And Steve, like the history goes way back to the 70s, and you were making music till the mid of the 80s, and there was a long hiatus until 2014, and you guys came back like a storm, giving amazing music. So how has the road been for you since the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, are you talking about the time in the middle when what I was doing when I wasn't doing music?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I went into, I knew that I had to sort of get away from the music business in around 1985, 86. I'd just had enough, and it was more to do with the people that were around me. I just didn't get on with the management and the whole sort of system that was in place. And so I decided to walk away from it. And again, to use a sporting analogy, as a performer, the most powerful drug in the world is adrenaline. That's, you know, it's the ultimate in high, and it's addictive. There's no question about that. And I think it was very difficult for me to sort of stop playing professionally and then just dabble a little bit. I thought, if I stop, I'm going to have to stop, like stopping smoking or something. You know, it was like alcoholic even, you know, it's this kind of intensity. Because the adrenaline is real, it's a real chemical, and it can mess with you, you know. So basically, that was it. I shut myself off from the business completely. And I got an opportunity to write some courses, educational courses for City and Guilds and for Westminster University and Westminster College in London. And I did it based on sound engineering and working in recording studios. And I actually wrote courses and did a lot of teaching of sound engineering, not just in music and music technology, but for live sound, theatre, synchronization for film and television, all that sort of stuff. Because outside of the BBC, there was nowhere for young people to be trained as sound engineers. So myself and a couple of colleagues from the top London studios, we got together and devised some courses for students to train in sound engineering. So I did that for 20 years, and because I was focused on that, and it was a very creative 20 years, writing is, you know, courses and seeing young people get education and get jobs and get work. It was incredibly satisfying, and I sort of was quite happy with that. I wasn't sort of, it helped me to break the performance addiction, you see. Mm-hmm. So in a way, I was glad I'd done that, and I wouldn't change that for the world. And that's why I was reluctant to come back, because I was like a bit, oh my God, can I really play again? You know, I didn't know if I could play again on stage, really. I never really thought about it. So all my time and energy and creative energy mainly went into education and trying to help people get jobs and train them as sound engineers. And I never spoke about my music, about what I'd done or who I was. So no one really knew, because I'd got the pseudonym, of course, and it kept me in the background. So that's what I did, and yeah, it was a very good period for me, and I enjoyed it. And I was still sort of in the loop of technology, and in a way now I've benefited because I understand the whole process of mixing and mastering. And Joe Clancy's another guy I used to work with actually back in the day at the Westminster College. And Joe Clancy, the drummer, you know, he's a fantastic drummer, but he also is a great engineer, you know. And so through the technology and through the education in the UK, the college, we reinvented Vardis, really, which is quite amazing. And yeah, is that the right answer that you're looking for?
Yeah.
I never know if I'm saying the right answer to the right question. I forget the question, so I don't know if I'm still on the track.
It's totally fine, Steve. And Steve, finally, what would be the message that you want to give to your amazing fans around the world?
Just want to say that it's been an absolute blast to come back this past sort of 7 years, and we've had a lot of hiccups on the way, and we lost Terry Horbury, the bass player, in 2016, which was a very tragic period, and that set us back another year, and then we get ourselves sorted out. And with Rowley, who was a fantastic player and a great solo artist in his own right, and multi-musician. He's a great player, and he's brought out a lot in me, Rowley, actually, I have to say that. And then, of course, we get the album in the can, and then the COVID thing kicks in, so all that gets set back another year. So I think, apart from the fact that Vardis fans have had to wait for nearly 30 years, the fact that now that we've come back, we still keep getting these moments where things get put back a little bit. I just want to thank them for being so patient and being so fantastically true to the music and the understanding of the music, and enjoying it. And after all these years, enjoying it, and hopefully a new generation. And as I said, rock and roll is timeless, and I'm sure when we look at it, new people will be introduced to the music and enjoy it too. And that's really I can't, you know, God bless you, you know, I just think, yeah, it's fantastic. And this is what rock music should be all about, in the sense of, again, passing it on to future generations. And thank you very much for your loyal, and they are very loyal supporters of the band, and that's incredible, you know, because, yeah.
Absolutely, Steve. And Steve, I want to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity today to talk to you. And it's a real pleasure and honor to me to have a
Thank
legend like you. And thank you for the amazing music that you've been giving us for ages. And it's really great pleasure to listen to all this. And thanks for the
Thank you.
inspiration to a lot of bands who are coming up and will still come following your tracks. Thanks for that. And thanks again, Steve.
I enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. It's been a pleasure to meet you, and we'll speak again at some time in the future, I'm sure.
Surely.
Take care, my friend.
Take care, my friend. Bye-bye. Bye.